Mel Kiper, one of the lead analysts of ESPN, has just released his newest NFL mock draft, this time a 2-round mock draft. So in this video, we're going to go over every single pick of Mel Kiper's newest mock draft and let you guys know whether I agree or disagree. Subscribe if you're new, let's hop into it. So as you can see, we are on ESPN's website and obviously Kiper's pick predictions for rounds 1 and 2. I'll go through each pick, hopefully pretty quickly so I don't take up too much of your time. And we of course are going to begin with round 1. The Tennessee Titans take Cam Ward. Everyone knows this is probably going to happen. It's kind of, the cat's out of the bag at this point. The Titans need quarterback. Cam Ward is a young prospect that everyone seems to fall in love with because of the playmaking potential that he does have. So for Tennessee, this one makes a lot of sense, and it's probably the right pick at this point. Number 2, there's been a lot of conversation, and it kind of feels like things have been swinging in the right direction for Travis Hunter, now becoming the lead favorite for the Cleveland Browns. For a while, it was Abdul Carter, but now it seems like the pendulum is now going a bit more towards the cornerback slash receiver out of Colorado in Travis Hunter. I think it's the right pick. It kind of fixes 2 issues for Cleveland, whereas Abdul Carter only kind of fixes what you're already kind of good at, which is getting to the quarterback. Yes, you need a pass rusher opposite of Myles Garrett, but you can probably find that in rounds 2, especially because they have a early second-round pick. So I just think this is the right pick. You don't really have too much depth in the receiving core outside of Jerry Jeudy. You also could use another corner, so Travis kind of fixes a little bit of both things for this Browns team. Then third overall, the New York Giants don't overthink it and they just take Abdul Carter. I would say if this were to happen where number 1 goes the quarterback and number 2 goes Hunter, I think the Giants might be in a situation where they might trade down because their defensive line is already kind of the strength of their defense. With that said, pairing Abdul Carter with Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and Brian Burns turns that Giants defensive line from already really good to probably the best in the NFL, especially if Abdul Carter is fantastic next year. With that said, like I mentioned, I think this would potentially be a trade down spot for the New York Giants, but if they actually were to take Abdul Carter, that would be bad news for whatever opposing quarterback goes up against that Giants defensive line. Fourth overall, the Patriots take Will Campbell. Bit of a boring pick here, especially because Patriots fans are probably a bit more excited about guys like Armand Membu or maybe Tetsuo McMillan, but they do the right thing in protecting Drake May. Will Campbell fixed a lot of issues on this offensive line. He could play guard, center. I think he could still stick out and play tackle. So wherever the Patriots deem him best at, he can kind of fit in nicely for that Patriots offensive line and finally give Drake May some genuine help on that offensive line. Fifth is Mason Graham. It feels like we've almost been trying to find a different guy for the Jaguars. We've been complaining, oh, he's not big enough, arm length, so on and so forth, that we're almost trying to make up excuses for why the Jaguars should not pick Mason Graham, but it just kind of makes the most sense. If it's not Mason Graham, I think Genty makes some sense, or a receiver, but I just think that Mason Graham is the right pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars. He fixes a major need on the defensive line, somebody who can be a disruptor in the pass game and dominate against the run. It just makes a lot of sense for the Jaguars to just not overthink it and just take Mason Graham to build up their defensive line. Raiders take Ashton Genty. Again, nothing too crazy here. I feel like so far everything has kind of followed suit. I did take a bit of a sneak peek towards the second round, and there's a lot of good players who fall to the second round, so as we get down the board, we'll have better conversations, but Genty going to the Raiders also just makes a lot of sense. Again, nothing too crazy here. The Jets take Armand Membu. This one makes a lot of sense. The Jets need a good young right tackle. Armand Membu just kind of fits in that mold quite nicely. They'd have a tackle duo of Olu Fashanu and Armand Membu, 2 lengthy, long, strong, physical offensive linemen that move very well. So the Jets offensive line will be getting a significant upgrade with Armand Membu if this actually does happen. 8, the Carolina Panthers take Jalen Walker. Every single Mel Kiper mock draft, has taken Jalen Walker to the Panthers, so he probably knows a bit about that situation. It does sound like Walker is going to be a Carolina Panther if he ultimately falls to them. Kind of just makes a lot of sense. The Panthers need a pass rusher. They could also use an off-ball linebacker, and Jalen Walker kind of fixes both those issues. I don't love the value at pick 8. I've made it very known that I don't think Jalen Walker is a top 15 prospect in this draft, so I wouldn't take him at 8. If this was my pick, I'd probably take, Mike Green maybe, or I would try to trade down if a team wanted to trade up for, Shador or Ted McMillan, but ultimately, if they were to take Jalen Walker, I think as a prospect and with his abundance of talent, it could end up working out in the long haul. Just think in the immediate future, within the next 2 years, it could potentially slow this defense's growth. But if he does reach his potential, then I think he'll be a nice piece to add to this defense and just kind of be a movable piece that does multiple things, whether it's rushing the quarterback, stuffing the run as a linebacker, or whatever you need him to do. Now the Saints take Shador Sanders. So recently I saw a report that the Saints were interested in taking Shador if he does fall to 9, and I guess guess Mel Kiper's probably hearing similar things, or he's just predicting it to happen. This would make some sense. Look, I say this about the Saints team. The Saints team is a directionless roster, especially it kind of feels like it stems from the quarterback position. Like they have had older quarterback play that just kind of limits their ceiling. Like from a few years ago, it was the older Drew Brees, and then it went to, Dalton, it went to Jameis, and now it's with Derek Carr. And you look at the actual roster, and it's not a terrible roster by no means. Like, yes, it's an older roster that kind of feels like it's falling off a little bit. Like they need another pass rusher, probably another corner, some receiving help would be nice, but there are good enough pieces for a young quarterback to step in there day one and succeed pretty early. And even if you don't want him to start immediately like Shador, you can have him sit behind a guy like Derek Carr, who's a proven veteran, and I think it'd be a really good move for the Saints. Now at pick 9, taking Shore might be seen a little bit early, but again, quarterbacks are of value, and even though I don't know if I would say that Sanders is worthy of a top 10 pick, because I just think he's a bit more of like 15 to 20 range. If it is at pick 9, I have no issue with it because it just makes so much sense for the Saints to go into a new direction with a new quarterback, a young quarterback, and just kind of start building towards the future. Even if they are a team that is kind of struggling with cap space, getting off that Derek Carr contract in a few years will definitely help them out. 10, the Chicago Bears take Tyler Warren. Wow, I actually did not see this one earlier. This one is really interesting because the Bears are in a situation where they can kind of do whatever they want, basically the entire draft. Like they can go offensive line to, build up some depth there or build up some younger pieces, or they could go running back here, or they can trade down. But there's every single offseason, it feels like Cole Kmet is just kind of not like 100% certain that he's going to be a Bear the next season. Like earlier, like a few months ago, there was reports that Cole Kmet might be off the roster, and now he's back on the roster, or at least staying on the roster. And it kind of feels like, there is always a question mark surrounding him. So by bringing in Tyler Warren, obviously that probably puts Cole Kmet's future with the team in serious jeopardy, maybe even as soon as this offseason or next offseason. But I like the pick here for the Bears. Like this is a Bears team with Ben Johnson that wants to run the football. They want to rely on their offensive line, and a big part of that was the tight end play. There was a reason why the Detroit Lions were so adamant about getting a guy like Sam Laporta and seeing what he can do out there. And I think Tyler Warren kind of would fill a very similar role to what Sam Laporta does there, where he can be very involved in the passing game, but also do a lot of really good things in the run game as well. He's big, physical, versatile. I think that he would be a fun piece. He could be a reliable target for Caleb Williams to go to. So I haven't done this in my mock drafts, but I might start doing it if it is available for me, especially if Genty's off the board and the top 2 tackles are off the board, because it just kind of makes a lot of sense for them to take Tyler Warren if you kind of just break it down like that. 11, the Niners take Will Johnson. Yes, there is some injury concerns with Will Johnson. The 2024 tape wasn't the greatest, but I still do believe that he is arguably the best pure outside corner in this draft class. His 2023 tape is awesome. His 2024, not as good, but still pretty darn good at times. This is a Niners team that loses out on Charvarius Ward. They lose Talanoa Hufanga. Obviously, like they say, they have Renardo Green. They have Mustafa. They have DeAndre Lenore. They have a couple other pieces in the secondary. Will Johnson feels like he could be that true lockdown cornerback 1 or 2 who plays on the outside opposite of Renardo or Lenore, depending on what happens there. So I like the pick here at 11. I think Jahdae Barron might make a bit more sense because of his versatility, but I have no issue with Will Johnson here. All right, at number 12, the Dallas Cowboys take Amarian Hampton. Now, I got to be honest with you, as somebody who is a little bit more tapped in with the Cowboys than I am with other rosters and their teams, I will tell you, I don't think the Cowboys are going to take running back round 1. I think it's much more likely they'll just stick at 12 to take Matthew Golden or Tetairoa McMillan and then take running back on day 2. However, if they were to take Amarian Hampton like he is projected to go here by Mel Kiper, I have no issue with the pick. I think Amarian Hampton is a awesome player. He moves nicely. He has good athleticism, good contact balance, a bit more of a physical style guy. He's big, like 221 pounds, as he said here. And Jerry Jones likes to take running backs. He likes to run the football. Kind of was a bit shocking they didn't do so last year, but again, last year's draft class wasn't filled with great running backs. So Cowboys get a bit of ahead of the curve here. Just go ahead and just lock in a running back of the future. So again, if it's me, I'm taking a receiver, especially because McMillan's on the board here. But if they don't want to take McMillan or they don't trust Matthew Golden, taking Amarian Hampton makes a lot of sense. All right, 13, the Miami Dolphins take Jahdae Barron. I have to be honest with you, I'm a little surprised that he doesn't have them taking a offensive lineman here, especially with Teron Armstead just making his announcement that he's retiring, which I think is kind of messed up. Like, he should have just told them immediately after the season that he was going to retire. But the Dolphins were bad off on the offensive line last year. Kelvin Banks is on the board here. Just think you don't overthink it and take him. But if they do take Kelvin Banks' teammate at Texas, Jahdae Barron, he kind of can fix a lot of the issues on the defense. I kind of wondered where they would put him because they have Ramsey, they have Storm Duck. They have their slot position kind of figured out, but the safety room is a little bit interesting. So you kind of can move Jahdae Barron like anywhere outside in the slot, play him deep as a safety. So if they were to take Jahdae Barron, I think it would be a good fit scheme-wise, and I think it'd be a good fit personnel-wise because he can kind of fix any of their issues. I just kind of wonder where they would ultimately use him at. Coastal Loveland goes to the Colts. Nothing to talk about there. We've had this predicted on basically almost every mock draft that the Colts will take either Warren, Loveland. I do think there is some maybe potential for them to take another position rather than a tight end if like a Jahdae Barron falls to them or if a really good offensive lineman falls here, but taking Coastal Loveland checks out. Mike Green goes to the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons need to get pressure on quarterbacks. Mike Green might be the best pure pass rusher in the early portion of the draft, at least just immediately. So I think for Atlanta, it makes a lot of sense. Hopefully, and maybe I could be wrong here, but hopefully the off-the-field stuff is either settled or about to be settled. Arizona takes Matthew Golden to pair next to Marvin Harrison Jr. This is one I have not seen. It's been pretty consistent that I've seen the Cardinals take either a lineman, a tackle, defensive tackle that be, or a corner. But with no Jahdae, with no Will Johnson, they decided to pass up on a guy like Kelvin Banks here to just go ahead and lock in their wide receiver 2 next to Marvin Harrison Jr. I think this one makes a lot of sense. Like, you have a number of guys in that receiving core, Dortch, Wilson, and now of course Harrison as well. But I just don't feel like any of those guys outside of Harrison could really fill in a wide receiver 2 role. And so by getting a guy like Matthew Golden, you get that bona fide outside guy who I think might have some versatility to play on the slot a little bit too. But I like it a lot. This is Matthew Golden who just is a reliable target. He gets open. He finds a way to create separation. Very solid hands. And you pair that with Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, the Cardinals will be having a really nice, young, solid receiving core of the future. All right, the Bengals take Jahad Campbell. I just kind of feel like this one makes a lot of sense. Campbell can play the edge. He can play an off-ball linebacker or wherever you really want to use him at. This would be somebody who can get to the quarterback, stuff the run. I think he's solid enough in coverage. This Bengals defense is not very good. Hopefully Trey Hendrickson does come back. So if that does happen, I like the fit a lot here of Jahad Campbell just kind of fitting in as a middle linebacker alongside Jermaine Pratt, who's also probably going to be out the door here soon. And so if that does happen, then Jahad Campbell kind of fits it quite nicely. All right, 18, the Seahawks take Kelvin Banks. Not too much to talk about here. I think he likely moves inside to play guard and maybe could be their long-term right tackle, depending on what happens with Abraham Lucas. All right, the Buccaneers get Nick Emanwari, which is extremely interesting because they already have Antoine Winfield Jr., and it kind of feels like the secondary for the Buccaneers is pretty dang solid. But Nick Emanwari can fill in more of a strong safety role, and I think he can play inside the box quite a bit. I mean, like he says, good luck throwing downfield on Tampa Bay with Emanwari and Antoine Winfield Jr. locking up both sides. That's going to be extremely difficult. Probably would say Shamar Stewart might be who I would take here, but man, Nick Emanwari, a hellacious athlete, moves super nicely, still has some flaws to his game. I think tackling and ankle pursuit could use some work, but this is a Buccaneers team that really preaches fundamentals, so I think Nick Emanwari would be a great fit here for his future and also for the Buccaneers. All right, the Broncos take Tetairoa McMillan, who falls all the way to pick 20. I don't think that's going to happen, but if it does happen, I kind of feel like it's an interesting fit for the Broncos because they already have Courtland Sutton, who can do more than just win downfield, but I guess McMillan could be seen as somebody who does kind of the opposite of Courtland Sutton, where Sutton's a bit more of a downfield guy and McMillan's a bit more of your possession guy, which does check out. Like, he's 6'5", but he doesn't play like a true 6'5". His game's a little bit different. With that said, I mean, you'd have some legitimate size out there on the football field. Courtland Sutton 6'4", Evan Ingram 6'3", McMillan 6'4". Like, yeah, good luck stopping those guys with, you know, your 5'11" corners. Like, just good luck. So for the Broncos to take McMillan, pair that up with what they have in speed outside of McMillan and Sutton, I think it does make a lot of sense. All right, 21, the Pittsburgh Steelers go ahead and take Derek Harmon. This one is pretty interesting. The defensive line for the Pittsburgh Steelers maybe could use some more help up the middle with another dominant disruptor, and that's kind of what Derek Harmon can be. Like he says, he's a headache for opponents. He can get to the quarterback. He's solid in run defense. Pair that up with Keanu Benson and what they already have on that defensive line with TJ Watt. I feel like that defensive line for Pittsburgh would be pretty nasty for the next couple years. All right, this one's an interesting pick here. The Chargers take Gray Zabel. I kind of wonder where they would put him at, because this is a Chargers team that just signed Mekhi Becton, so maybe he can play tackle, guard, or maybe even center. So I guess there's some versatility there. I feel like there's bigger needs for the Chargers than an offensive lineman, but if you just want to put together the nastiest run offense in the league, I feel like Gray Zabel kind of continues that trend. You put him maybe besides Mekhi, or at the left guard position, or just wherever. I feel like that could be pretty nasty. Again, I don't really feel like it's the biggest need for the Chargers, so this one's kind of a bit of a question mark. Like, Emeka Egbuka's on the board, Luther Burden's on the board. Maybe you go out there and take an edge rusher, which feels like a bigger need. So I don't know about this pick. I'm not a huge fan. All right, Packers take Michael Williams. Not much to talk about here. Michael struggled with an injury last year, so his productivity was not maybe as good as what you would want it to be, but he's dominant against the run, and I think there is some legitimate pass rush juice with him, just kind of needs to be untapped. And I think the Packers with Rashawn Gary could potentially do so. All right, Minnesota takes Donovan Jackson to kind of finish up some of the offensive line issues they had last year. Kind of interesting because they feel like they sort of did so by bringing in Ryan Kelly and Will Fries from the Colts. So maybe they want another younger piece to pair next to them and maybe become, fill in these guys' spots when they eventually do move on, because Kelly, I believe, is a little bit older. So maybe that's how it works out. Still think there's probably bigger needs for the Vikings, more so of like a running back, or, a Kenneth Grant is still on the board. So I like the pick a lot because Donovan Jackson's a fantastic player, but just think there might be some better value on the board of positions of needs. So kind of interesting. I also think cornerback too should also be in play there. All right, Houston takes Josh Connerly. I'm a little surprised they didn't take Josh Simmons here, because I think Simmons is just a better player than Connerly. With that said, Connerly is a fantastic player who was really solid last year for the Oregon Ducks, and this is a Houston offensive line that just could maybe use a couple more bodies, especially younger bodies, so this one does kind of check out to me. And here we go. Jackson Dart goes to the LA Rams. Where do I begin with this one? For starters, if Jackson Dart does go to the Rams, I think it's a great spot for him because he can sit behind Matthew Stafford for 1 or at least 2 more years. So if that were to happen, Dart would be able to be the successor of Stafford. He can learn behind him, and hopefully when his time does come, he can become a better player. I like Jackson Dart. I think he's a good player. I'm not a Jackson Dart guy, frankly. I have him outside of my top 100 big board. He would not be a first-round pick. I would probably struggle to take him in round 2. But if he were to go to the LA Rams at any portion of the draft, I think it would be a good spot for him personally. Because, again, he could sit behind Matthew Stafford, and Stafford can kind of help him learn the little small flaws to his game. Again, Dart has a good arm, good personality. He's a feisty guy and moves quite well. I think his pocket presence is solid. Throws a nice deep ball. Accuracy is not too shabby. He's got some game to him. It's just that I think everything mentally, when it comes to like scanning the field, he's going to need a lot of time to develop because Ole Miss didn't really have him, doing too much of dropping back and, reading safeties, linebackers, and corners. Rather, it's kind of just throw it to whoever the play is designed to go to. And sometimes you have moments where Jackson Dart and Ole Miss are throwing the ball in the end zone into quadruple coverage. So for the Rams, they would have to kind of get that out of his game and kind of shore him up to become a better reader of the field. But if they can do so, again, it would be a good spot for him if the LA Rams were to take him at any point of the draft to sit behind Stafford for a year, maybe 2 years, if they can bring him back for another year. Just kind of, build a successor for what you have in Matthew Stafford. So again, I don't love it, but at the same time, I don't hate it. So let's just kind of put it that way. I don't love the value at 26, but I don't hate the landing spot. All right, Ravens take Malachi Starks, a do-it-all safety that does basically everything you need him to do. He's a playmaker down deep, and kind of wonder what you would do with Kyle Hamilton. Like, would he move a bit more into the nickel to play a bit closer to the box, or how does that work out? Either way, Malachi Starks kind of fits in wherever you need him to, and he's a top-tier talent that falls to 27 just simply because he's a safety, so I like the pick there a lot. All right, Detroit gets a pass rush juice in Donovan Ezaraku. Pair that up with Hayden Hutchinson. I think that makes a lot of sense. This guy is really good at getting to the quarterback, a constant disruptor. Not sure how good he'll be against the run, but I think as a pass rusher, at least immediately, will be dominant, and especially next to Hayden Hutchinson, who's so far so good when it comes back to his leg injury. All right, Washington takes Shamar Stewart. This one makes some sense. Washington could really use some pass rush juice. You lose Dante Fowler to the Dallas Cowboys. You need that next guy who can step in there and just be a disruptor off the edge, and Shamar Stewart could be the guy. I think that's kind of the best way to discuss Shamar Stewart right now. He is a disruptor. He's not a guy who can finish the play quite yet, but as time goes on, you're hoping that he can start to turn those pressures into sacks and turn all those great flashes into, statistics like tackles for loss and, sacks and so on and so forth. So I think there's a lot of potential and untapped abilities in Shamar Stewart. And if there's a guy who can get that out of him, I think it would be a guy like Dan Quinn. So I like the pick there. All right, Buffalo takes Maxwell Hairston. Kind of a interesting pick here, especially with guys like Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan still on the board. But they take Maxwell Hairston, a really good athlete, good ball skills, can move around quite nicely with a 4.28. This was a Bills defense that felt like they had some issues getting to the quarterback. So again, I kind of feel like maybe I would go pass rush help here, especially up the middle. But the coverage also could use some help. I mean, Christian Benford is great. Rasul Douglas, I'm not sure he's on the team quite yet. We'll have to wait and see. And then Dane Jackson is also there, but they need more bodies. So Maxwell Hairston does check out. Just kind of feel like I would have taken a pass rusher up the middle like a Maxwell Hairston or, Kenneth Grant, who's still available. All right, Kansas City takes Josh Simmons. Kind of a weird spot for Simmons to fall like all the way down to 31. I think Simmons is one of the better offensive tackle prospects. It just kind of sucks that he, had a bad knee injury. With that said, Kansas City did sign Jalen Moore, who you're hoping can step into a starting role off the tackle position because you paid him like it. But I don't know if it's a sure thing. Like, it's not 100% that Jalen Moore can actually be a legitimate starter out there. And then you also have Kingsley, who I'm assuming they're going to play at guard. But if not, maybe you move Simmons in to play guard. I don't know. What I do know is by bringing in Josh Simmons, you have multiple options on the offensive line to where you're not having to move one of your guards out to play tackle like they had to do last year. So this gives them more options. I would be very intrigued if this were the pick to see how they actually construct that offensive line. And the last pick of the first round before we get to the second round, and by the way, when we get to the second round, I'll probably just go through certain picks that I like, and we have a shocker here in the beginning of round 2 we'll talk about. But before we get to there, at 32, the Philadelphia Eagles takes James Pierce Jr., a once thought to be potential first overall pick who kind of had a interesting year last year for Tennessee, falls to the Philadelphia Eagles. This is an extremely Philadelphia Eagles move. Let the talent fall right into their lap and just don't overthink it. And in this situation, it kind of was like the perfect player because they could use some pass rush juice. And if there's a team that can get the most out of James Pierce Jr., who apparently does have some character issues, but Philadelphia can easily fix that because of their culture and who they already have there. So I love the pick. And here we go. The first 2 picks of the second round are extremely shocking. Tyler Shaw, the 25-year-old quarterback with multiple years of injuries, goes to the Cleveland Browns. Or sorry, I think it's Tyler Shock, by the way. And then Jalen Milroe goes to the New York Giants at 34. Really interesting. So we'll start off with 33. Now, I have a podcast called the First and 10 Podcast. I just started it. It'll be in the description below if you are interested in seeing that podcast. But in the podcast, me and my co-host Cade, we're doing a top 10 quarterback rankings video. And I had Tyler Shock at 11. And my friend Cade had him, I want to say, in his top 5, like I think 4th. So he was a lot higher on him than I was. And I was not a huge fan of Tyler Shock. Now, the reasons why I wasn't a big fan of him, an older prospect with multiple years of leg injuries, doesn't move around quite well, and is exclusively playing as a shotgun guy. Like, he never plays under center. So that kind of just is a bit confusing for me. I don't love the pick here because if I'm the Browns, like why would I even waste my pick on a quarterback? They're nowhere close to being competitive right now, and you're going to put Tyler Shock behind a bad offensive line after years of leg injuries? I just don't like it. Now, I have no issue with Shock going in the second round as a prospect because I think there is some talent there, but going to the Browns, I think just makes no sense. Like, just tank for another year, start Pickett, or draft somebody in round 3 maybe, like Dylan Gabriel or Quinn Ewers or somebody like that. See what they could do. I mean, this is a roster that's really bad. Like, who's their running back right now? Who's their second receiver? Their offensive line is not good. The defense has some pieces, and of course, they drafted Travis Hunter, who fixed a lot of their issues, but I am not a fan whatsoever of this pick. Now, Cade, my co-host, would love this pick. I am not a fan of this one, though, at all, so that's just my opinion. Milroe to the Giants, though, I do find to be a bit more interesting. I just think that I could see Milroe going as early as the second round to the Giants. Giants would be a team that kind of feels like maybe they have to take a quarterback at some point to lock in their future, at least head coach and general manager wise. So if you want to secure your future, taking Milroe and saying that we're going to develop him could potentially make some sense. With that said, he needs to develop, and I just don't know if as a thrower of the football, you would want him to sit behind Wilson and Jameis. Again, those are 2 NFL quarterbacks and have been NFL quarterbacks for years, but they both have very big flaws to their game, especially as throwers of the football. Like Jameis, he throws a bunch of interceptions, a lot of turnovers. Russell Wilson kind of doesn't throw it down the middle often. Kind of a weirder, a different play style than what you're used to from a typical pocket passing quarterback. So while I like the upside of Milroe, just don't think it's a great fit for the Giants. So not a huge fan of either one of these picks here. I'm a bigger fan of the Milroe pick, more so than this one, but yeah, not a big fan here. I think the value is also very questionable. All right, 35 takes Olu Oladejo. I've actually never seen him go in the second round before, so this one's pretty interesting. A very high upside pass rusher from what I know about him, but just doesn't have the productivity quite yet. But Tennessee could take a flyer on him because they definitely could use some pass rush juice. Emeka Egbuka falls to the second round here to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Also, Luther Burden's still available too, by the way. This one makes a lot of sense. He kind of would probably be your replacement for Christian Kirk. Pair him up next to Brian Thomas Jr. Kind of a perfect fit here. So I like what the Jaguars have done so far in this draft, getting Emeka Egbuka and also getting Mason Graham. It's a good start for them. 37, the Raiders take Carson Schlesinger, a former walk-on linebacker who had an awesome 2024 season, 115 tackles, 4 sacks, 2 picks, and the Raiders get their replacement for Robert Spillane, and obviously Divine Diablo goes elsewhere too, so that kind of figures out that spot there. You're just kind of hoping that Carson Schlesinger is not a one-hit wonder, which is a legit concern, but he's got good size, moves quite nicely. I like the pick here a lot for the Raiders. I'm a pretty big fan of Carson. 38, the fall for Luther Burden finally finishes here. Luther Burden goes to the New England Patriots. Kind of an interesting player here because Luther Burden kind of reminds me in some ways of Stephon Diggs in terms of they have similar size. Both kind of can play in the slot, but also can play on the outside. So it would be interesting to see how they deploy him and Stephon Diggs because they're built pretty similar to one another. But with that said, as he mentions, I think it would be a really interesting complement of two receivers that can find ways to get open, one being a bit more of a better athlete at his stage of his career. So you put him next to Drake May for the foreseeable future. I like the pick. All right, Bears take Walter Nolan. Walter Nolan falls to the second round here, and the Bears just take advantage of the value here and add in a nice pass rush element up the middle, who I think has some potential to be really good against the run too. You have Jervon Dexter Sr., you have Grady Jarrett. Kind of just felt like you need that third guy, and I think Walter Nolan could be the future there, so I like that pick. Azariah Thomas will play alongside Kool-Aid McKinstry and Alontae Taylor for the New Orleans Saints with pick 40. Taylor probably moves inside as a nickel. Kool-Aid plays on the outside, and then Azariah kind of finishes off that trio of corners. So I like what they planned here, and I feel like the Saints would have a nice bit of a core here. Low-key, a pretty solid draft for the Saints. You get your quarterback of the future, and you get a cornerback who plays opposite of Kool-Aid. So I don't hate what they've done. All right, same thing with the Chicago Bears here. I like what they've done too. Taking Tyler Warren, taking Walter Nolan, and now getting Travion Henderson to pair him up next to DeAndre Swift. Now, admittedly speaking, I probably would have taken Quinshad Judkins because he's a bit of a bit more of a difference maker in terms of what you already have with DeAndre Swift. Like Swift is a bit more of your speedster, and Quinshad could be a bit more of a between the tackles runner. But Travion Henderson can also do the exact same thing. So Travion also has a bit more of an explosive element to him. So for the Chicago Bears, this one makes a lot of sense. Again, I think I would take Quinshad or Caleb Johnson over Travion in this certain with this specific team, but if they take this pick, I have no problem with it. All right, the Jets take Elijah Arroyo here. They did not take Tyler Warren. They didn't get Colston Loveland, so they reach on Elijah Arroyo here. Admittedly speaking, I'm not the biggest fan of Elijah Arroyo. He's a downfield stretching tight end who more of a receiving guy, more so than a pass blocking option. Probably would have taken Mason Taylor, but if they were to take Arroyo, I don't have an issue with it. All right, Kenneth Grant falls all the way to 43. I do not think this will happen, and if it does happen, I expect a team to trade up into the early portion of the second round to pick him up here. If he doesn't, though, Kenneth Grant to the San Francisco 49ers makes so much sense. Outside of Nick Bosa, that defensive line for the Niners is very suspect, so Kenneth Grant kind of fixes up that defensive line in a big way. Trey Amos to the Dallas Cowboys also checks out. The two studs for the Cowboys have dealt with injuries, both Bland and Diggs. Amos fits in there, can play on the nickel, can play on the outside, kind of finishes up that secondary and gives them another body if an injury were to occur. Jonas Savania could be the replacement for what you lost in Will Fries and Ryan Kelly. Good run blocker, as well as has some good skill in the passing game as well. I think putting him there with Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor would help that run game out a ton. Benjamin Morrison goes to the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons pair up AJ Terrell with Benjamin Morrison. You're hoping the hip injury is okay, because if it is okay, Benjamin Morrison is definitely worth the pick here. I like what the Falcons have done so far in terms of this mock draft. In the first round, they went ahead and took Mike Green. In the second round, they take the potential of Benjamin Morrison. If both those picks work out, which both picks have a little bit of a risk value to them, but if they both work out, I think it makes the Falcons defense significantly better. All right, the Cardinals take Tyler Booker, a strong run blocker who, if he gets his hands on you, you're not going to get off his grip. Do kind of worry about him in sort of a zone run scheme, but I think the Cardinals could definitely work in Tyler Booker with their offense. Darius Alexander goes to the Miami Dolphins. Darius is an older prospect, but the Miami Dolphins need proven commodities right away. Still think offensive line is a big need for them, so I'm kind of surprised they didn't go there. But they do need defensive tackle help, so I don't have a huge issue with the pick here either. Bengals take JT Tuimoloau. You pair that up with who they took in Jahad Campbell. I feel like it's two really solid defensive prospects who can both get to the quarterback, who are also great against the run. JT is a pure edge rusher, whereas Jahad can kind of move around to wherever you need him to, so I like the pick. Shavon Ravel goes to the Seattle Seahawks, who kind of interesting because Ravel kind of reminds me a lot of Tariq Woolen, so maybe Rick Woolen's job is questionable at this point, or at the same time, maybe you just want to pair Ravel up with Rick Woolen to have two freakishly long athletic corners who can create turnovers so easily. Pair that up with Devon Witherspoon, who's a bit more of a physical guy. I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. Broncos take Quinshaw Judkins here in the second round. They needed another running back to add to their roster, and this one checks out. Higgins falls to the Seattle Seahawks in a move that I really do like here. You have two inside receivers in JSN and Cooper Kupp. You have Marquez Valdes-Scantling, a bit more of a downfield stretcher, but Higgins is long, lengthy, moves very well. I think he's an underrated player, not necessarily a burner, not the fastest guy, nor is the best after the catch, but man, he just gets open. He knows every single route in the books, and I just love the player. I think at 52 is great value for Jaden Higgins. 53, the Buccaneers get a pass rusher in Nick Scourton, somebody who can kind of finish up that defensive line. I like Scourton. I thought he was a little bit better at Purdue, more so than A&M, but still think is a great player. Jack Betch goes to the Green Bay Packers. Not a huge fan of this pick, to be honest with you. Betch is a big slot receiver, who I like, by the way. I like Jack Betch. I just don't love the fit because the Packers need a difference maker on the offensive end, and Jaden Reed is kind of does a lot of similar things to Jack Betch, so I don't know about this pick, to be honest with you. All right, the Chargers take Mason Taylor to just continue to add big physical guys on their offense. I mean, you took Gray Zabel on the offensive line with the first pick, and this time you take Mason Taylor. I like the pick here because the Chargers do need a future tight end. Again, I kind of think edge rusher might have been what I would have targeted here, though, but I still like Mason Taylor a lot. Tyleik Williams goes to the Buffalo Bills, a dominant run stuffer who I think could give you something in the pass rush department, but that's kind of what this Bills team needs. They already have Larry Ogunjobi, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, so they just really need a big, physical, fat boy who can sit up the middle and be a good run stuffer, so I like that here for the Buffalo Bills. Panthers stick in and take Isaiah Bond, the speedster out of Texas. Obviously, kind of got flamed on for his combine performance for only running a 4.4 when he said he was going to run a 4.2. Kind of embarrassing. With that said, Isaiah Bond is a legit track athlete, moves very nicely. I think he's a solid route runner as well. Just kind of had a weird year for Texas. So if you can kind of look past his end here with Texas and more so look at his tape with Bama and pre-ankle injury Texas, then I think you'll fall in love with Isaiah Bond a little bit more. Jalen Noel, the slot receiver, goes to the Houston Texans. I like this pick a lot. Kind of feel like you already sort of have that on your roster though, but if you feel like he could be an upgrade in the slot, when Tank Dell does come back at some point, hopefully later in the season, maybe Dell can play a bit more on the outside with Nico and then Noel playing a bit more on the slot. Don't hate the pick at all here because he is a very reliable target who I think CJ Stroud would fall in love with really quickly. All right, David Walker, the outside linebacker to Central Arkansas. I got to be completely honest with you. I have not seen him in the second round too often, so I'm kind of intrigued to see what he has to say here. Quickness, power, and bend off the edge. Mixes up his pass rush plan to keep offensive tackles guessing. Okay, interesting. You put him opposite of Kyle Van Noy and Odafe Owe, hopefully develop him, and maybe next year could be their starter. So that's interesting. Anthony Belton, the tackle guard, goes to the Detroit Lions. This one does check out. I wonder if he'll start or if he'll be a depth option who maybe at some point could slide inside to play as a starter. Washington takes Darian Porter, somebody who really only only has like one genuine year of legitimate film. Like he played a little bit throughout his career, but kind of a late riser. But there's a lot of untapped potential, moves nicely, ball skills to create turnovers. You pair that up with what you already have in that secondary, and I low-key like the pick. I also think he could potentially play like a nickel or even on the outside. Xavier Watts goes to the Buffalo Bills. I feel like Watts is likely going to be taken earlier. Yes, he struggles to tackle, but man, he is an absolute ball hawk deep down the field. Feels like Mel Kiper is not a huge fan of safeties because all these great safeties are falling down his draft board, so kind of keep that in mind. 63, the Chiefs take Caleb Johnson. I love the pick here. The Chiefs are at their best when they have a dominant play action game, a good running back. Pacheco went out with an injury last year, and it just felt like that offense really missed his game. Caleb Johnson kind of fills that role perfectly for this team. A physical bruiser, can get the tough yards sort of stout guy. And you pair that with hopefully a healthy Isaiah Pacheco, and you're getting two physical running backs that no defense is going to want to tackle. And last, the Philadelphia Eagles sure up their secondary by taking Kevin Winston, who had an injury last year, so it's a bit of a question mark here, but he's likely going to be the replacement for CJ Gardner-Johnson, and I do not hate this pick at all. Probably still would have considered like an offensive lineman here, or maybe a defensive tackle to replace what you lost in Milton Williams, but I like the pick here a lot. But you guys let me know in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on Mel Kiper's mock draft? I think it's a pretty interesting mock draft, but I definitely do disagree with a lot of the picks he took here. So you guys let me know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed, subscribe. Love you guys. Peace.